Hey, while we're getting started here, Miss Valentine's going to set out a sign up sheet that I just made because the we don't have the official one here yet, but it's going to ask for your name, organization, and position. So if you would give us that, put it on the front table right here, so we can do that. And as far as your position, if you're pro or you have a better one, okay, she's got the official one now. So Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get this meeting started and called to order. We'll settle in. This is a meeting of the House Higher Education Committee. We have one item on the agenda this morning, House Bill 602. We're going to go to Representative Fleming from the 114th. Representative, if you want to go down there, and if you have anyone you'd like to join to explain briefly your proposition, and then we'll get to our speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. Hope everybody had a great weekend. And Mr. Chairman, if it's all right, I'll review the bill real quick again, since we have some members that weren't here Friday, but it's HB 602. We're working off LC number 610093. HB 602, the discouraging violent, harassing, and materially disrupting student activity on higher education campuses in Georgia. In the United States, we respect the right to peacefully protest and even to engage in acts of civil disobedience. This bill does not limit the affect that right. Instead, it upholds the rights of students, faculty, and administrators on our college campuses to be free from the infringement of their rights to study and work, and targets individuals who use violence, vandalism, force, and harassment as a means to impose their will on others. Last year, we saw over 1,000 arrests of students around the nation on our campuses protests that often produce violence, significant damage to campus facilities, involved harassment of students and faculty based on their religion, and shut down the learning environment on these campuses. Those protests included an illegal encampment at UGA that resulted in the suspension of a number of students for recklessly disrupting the campus and refusing to disperse when ordered. Around the same time, protesters scuffled with police at Georgia State. More recently, UGA suspended a group called Students for Socialism after its members targeted an event on campus. This bill applies to students who receive state scholarships, loans, or grants, such as HOPE, to attend Georgia's public and private post-secondary educational institutions. It says that if you are such a recipient and are convicted or found through the institution's student disciplinary process to have committed certain acts of violence, vandalism, and aggression, that you will lose that financial support for 2 years. We are not talking here about punishing peaceful protest. The conviction or disciplinary action must be fighting, violence, or similar unlawful behavior, damaging property, forcefully and physically violating others' access to buildings and events on these campuses, significantly violating reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions, and engaging in harassing behavior. The Student Finance Commission, USG, and TCSG are required to create a process by which a student may be sanctioned, including creating a process for appealing any adverse action. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd like Representative Panich to say a few words to the bill as well.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Esther Panich. I'm a state rep from House District 51. I am also the only Jewish representative in this entire legislative body. As such, I am frequently contacted by Jewish students throughout the state and really throughout the country who tell me about their experiences being physically prevented from going to school, from going to class that they have paid for, being harassed on campus, being called all sorts of names personally, and being threatened on campus. And actually, we've had some assaults on campus, including one at UGA as well. It is time for there to be consequences to physical, violent actions which prevent other students from attending their classes. There is no problem with civil disobedience. You want to take over the admin building where there's no classes? Go right ahead. What this does is say if you rise to the level of a conviction and or the honor code violation, which, by the way, many universities and many prosecutors are loath to bring to begin with, but if you are convicted or found in violation of the honor code, then you should have your state benefits stripped. These are privileges, not rights. And Jewish students also have a right to learn in peace and safety. Preventing that in a physical way there is no justification for it. There was a article, the best person who can speak to this is Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt. She came from Emory University. She was appointed by the Biden administration as the U.S. ambassador to combat anti-Semitism. Her purview was abroad. She wasn't to tackle anything within the United States. She was offered a teaching position at Columbia Barnard until she saw what happened last week, where Barnard had expelled 2 students for walking into a class, physically stopping a class related to teaching about modern Israel, chanting in masks and preventing the professor from teaching the class. They were expelled. As a result of the expulsion, tens, if not dozens, if not more, took over a student building, putting a faculty member in the hospital. She has now refused to accept the position, first because she didn't want to be seen as a fig leaf or a token, having approved of it, but also because she says that there are no consequences to these actions. And we are seeing more and more students, particularly in the Northeast and the West Coast, who think it's okay to come in masked and to physically disrupt school from happening. I'm a parent. I've paid college tuition for 3 kids. I want to make sure my kids can access the school that I am paying for and not to be blocked and physically harassed by people in masks who don't even have the courage of their convictions to show their face, to tell my students, my kids, that they can't go to class because they're Jewish. And when you put something that says crush Zionism, which Ambassador Lipstadt referenced, I'm a Zionist. More than 90% of Jews around the world are Zionists. If there was a flyer that said crush black people, crush Asians, you think any of us would accept that ever? No. Thank you. I'll stand ready for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have 2 lights. We have a number of speakers. Are these questions for the author? We're not going to debate the bill until we get a motion. But if you have questions for the author, we'll do that. Representative Clark.
Yes. Not debating the bill. I wanted to ask about something in line 63 because it was brought up in the last committee meeting, and from what I understand, the intention is not necessarily being interpreted the way. So the question has to do with where it says any student who is convicted of a criminal offense and any student who is determined by the post-secondary, and you can read the rest. The way that when we asked last time it was interpreted is that the student would have to be convicted and they would have to get in trouble by the school. However, the way it's written, it says any student and then and any student again. So to me, that actually separates the 2 clauses from each other. And again, in the last meeting.
What's the question?
The question I'm asking is that the intent for them to be 2 separate clauses, or is it supposed to be both
fair enough,
have to
that's
happen?
the question. Yeah. If you could give us a brief answer to that, and again, we're not going to
Right.
amend the bill or debate the bill today, but just
Representative
let me ask the author of the bill what his intent is.
Yes,
What's
our
your
intent is
intent?
for it to be either or.
Okay, for either or.
That
That's
was
the
not
answer.
what was said last time, so that's why I wanted to ask.
That's
Thank
fair
you.
enough. That is his interpretation, and we'll clear that up as we move forward, and that is a policy that can be open for debate. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Fleming, thank you for bringing the legislation. Representative Panich, thank you for sharing that testimony. I shared the same concerns you do. I just want to clear up maybe some disinformation from last meetings where a witness testified that the language, the conduct we're trying to create some penalties for, that language could be, so here's my question, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
please.
Isn't it true that you clearly delineate that conduct would not be considered material and substantially disruptive if it is protected under the Georgia Constitution or the First Amendment of the United States. Isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So what?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you clarify your earlier comment of we can't be engaging this bill?
No, sir. I said we're not going to debate the bill. This is the time for questions. When we want to debate, if we get a motion on the bill at a later time, and the chair is not going to entertain action on the bill today, but we're just asking questions. What I'm trying to do, Representative, is to make sure we get to our speakers today. So if you have all the questions you want to ask the gentleman about the bill, that if I did not mean to infer that you could not engage him on that. I just didn't want to debate the merits of the bill until we get a motion. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have some significant concerns about the bill. I certainly understand where Representative Panich is coming from, but especially in this environment, I think it's very important not to be taking action that in any way could potentially infringe upon or chill the free speech rights of students. So, isn't it true that Chancellor Perdue told the General Assembly that the USG schools handled campus protests so well that it made it nationally competitive?
I didn't hear that, but if you say so.
Is it not already true if the Chancellor is saying, USG schools already handled these protests well, that made Georgia schools more competitive, that they already have the tools necessary to handle student conduct violations. So help me understand why this
And that
is
might be
necessary.
correct, Representative, but what this is giving them another tool for future issues, as we're seeing across the country. This is giving other tools in their belt, and it's also letting students know that, hey, you have the right to protest, you have the right to have your voice heard, but if you cross that line, there will be additional consequences to your actions.
So is it not true that the threat of losing financial aid would cause a chilling effect of free speech?
What it is saying is you have the right to your free speech, you have the right to protest, but once you cross that line, there will be additional consequences to your actions. I don't think this is chilling their right.
Secondary institution. Advanced search. Advanced search.
They still have every right they have to have their voice heard in a protest. It is just giving these institutions additional tools when the line is crossed.
Again, I think I recognize the intent to ensure that students aren't harassed, certainly, but again, I think this bill goes way overboard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it not true that if this bill had been around in let's say the 1960s, that the desegregation of colleges might have been a little less noisy and a little less dangerous for the people that were trying to break through that threshold?
Yes, sir.
Come on, Casey, man. You tripping.
Yeah, I said yes,
I
sir.
think they couldn't capture your head nod there. Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in lines 23 and 24. I understand convicted or conviction refers to a plea of guilty or a finding of guilty by a court, meaning that you take the case to the judge or the jury. Can you explain why you're also including the acceptance of a plea of no contest, nullo contendere, which would be that you're neither accepting nor denying?
Yeah.
Sometimes people do that just to avoid a trial.
Yes, sir. Mr. Rollins?
Thank you, Representative Holcomb. So the point being is that if you are either admitted or you are found, even if you're afforded first offender treatment, you've done it, a nolo plea. I mean, the truth is that if you did not engage in violent, harassing behavior, you probably should not be pleading guilty. And I think that's kind of the idea, of course, is that we want to make sure that any individual accused under this of doing this has due process. But as you know from your work, certainly if you are acknowledging that you have done something wrong or pleading nolo or getting a first offender, then you're still you've acknowledged the act.
My understanding of NOLO is a little bit different, is that you're not admitting, is that you're accepting the punishment, but you're not in fact admitting, nor is there a finding.
We're not going to.
Right.
No, I understand, but
Yeah.
I'm going to just step in here. We have people that have come to testify. You raise a good point, and one that is valid if the bill comes back and moves forward, and I believe the author would accept a discussion with you on that. I'm going to try to avoid with these folks that came out this morning to speak, taking that time for you guys to lawyer this up for us. We'll get an opportunity to do that at the time, and your point is well taken, Representative.
Thank
you. Number 17, Representative Glaze.
I'll wait until the appropriate time.
Thank you, ma'am. Representative Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because we've now clarified, and forgive me, I'm not a lawyer, we've clarified that in line
Neither am I.
63, that this is an either-or effect. And now I'm looking back at the list of possible infractions that a student could plead potentially no contest to, including things like engaging and fighting. I recognize that the intent of the bill is specifically about those students who are engaging in protests, but is there the possibility that a student convicted of a crime that falls under these categories could then lose their state funding regardless of whether they were engaged in a protest?
Where's that one?
Yeah, Representative Fleming asked me to answer this. So if you look at 2151, convicted or determined to have violated when such conviction or determination is a result of the student engaging in material and disruptive conduct on the campus, it's got to be part of this group violence, and I think the question is, if two people get in a fight at a football game, I don't think that's going to trigger it, but I see where you're coming from.
And I understand,
Yeah.
forgive me for the follow-up, I understand you don't think it will trigger, but I'm seeing any student convicted of a criminal offense, and then I'm seeing the word shall being denied their
Right.
state funds.
So
that concerns me.
And if you look at lines 37, a person intentionally engaging which person knows or reasonably should have known would significantly hinder another person's or group's expressive activity, or preventing communication of a message, or preventing the transaction of the business of a lawful meeting. So we're not talking about two individuals fighting over who won the game.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Clark, last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to also clarify something because both the author and Representative Panich mentioned this. Both said, oh, it doesn't matter if you're doing a sit-in or things like that. And someone even said, oh, you can take over the admin building. Wouldn't lines 48 and 49 also put students who are trying to do expressive activities, do some type of protest, do a sit-in? And I just want to say sit-ins are how desegregation, that was a part of the desegregation movement. I just wanted to point that out. Anyway, according to lines 48 and 49, wouldn't that also now put someone at jeopardy of losing their scholarship? I feel like this is trying to target a certain group, but it is so overarching and broad that it's not doing the thing that y'all are saying you want it to do. So I just want to clarify, could students take over the admin building?
Well, I think if you look at lines 53 through 55, it kind of clarifies some of that. But, if these students are blocking access to that building, if they are blocking staff, professors, administration, students from being able to get to class or get to services, then yes, that could be violation. I mean, it depends. If they're just sitting there in the entryway with stickers on that says whatever, and they're not preventing people from getting to class or getting to events or preventing their daily activity, then no. But if they are physically blocking entrance to buildings, physically blocking access to classrooms, then yes, that could be a violation.
I just want to say lines 48 and 49 don't talk about blocking or ingress or egress. That's those are lines 46 and 47. Lines 48 and 49 are specifically talking about violating reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And so that's a completely different thing than what you just said.
You want to take that?
Again, I'm not going to debate the bill.
That's fine.
The bill is open to interpretation by every member. I would, being quite shy of a law degree, tell you that I don't believe you're protected in your First Amendment to demand you stay in this building, even though it's a public building, if it's closed for secure purposes at night. I think if this were a college building and it closes every night, you would have to leave. You could come back when it opens in the morning, and you could stay till it closed in the afternoon. But just because you want to sit there and disrupt the normal operation of a campus being in a building that's normally closed, I would say that would probably a reasonable person would say that is materially violating reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. That you could.
That's the answer to my question. Is
that is my non-lawyer
And I agree with that, Mr. Chairman.
And that's it. All right, I'm going to go, Mr. Webb, I'm going to go one more time, but we've got people and we've got a hard stop at 8:50.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with respect to the definition of materially and substantially disruptive conduct, who determines that? Help me better understand how this bill would be enforced in a way, again, in which it would not be selective, overly broad, and again, result in the chilling of free speech of all of our Georgia students.
The reference to bill.
If Representative Park, you weren't here last week, we had a tight meeting. We had folks come out to speak. We've got 11 people, and we're now inside of probably an hour that we have left. Can we engage? We're going to have the bill back. Can we engage in that after we hear our speakers this morning?
Sure.
Thank you.
I mean, I think that's going to get back down to your interpretation versus his interpretation versus another member's interpretation. I just
want to better understand how this would be enforced.
Fair enough, and you will get his opinion on it. I'd just like to get to the 11, our speakers first, and then if we have time, we'll come back to you this morning. If we don't, we'll do it. If and when we meet again. Is that?
To your discretion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right. I think we've heard some things. I do want to get to our speakers, so if y'all would take a seat. Okay, we're going to start, and I'm going to do my best with the names we have in reading this. I believe this is Noelle McAfee. I have about, yes, ma'am. I have about 11 people, and we have about 55 minutes. So, I mean, you can, and you can sit or you can stand, whichever you prefer. Yes, ma'am. So just, we have about that time. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone. My name is Noelle McAfee, and I am professor and chair of the philosophy department at Emory University. I'm also president-elect of the Emory University Senate and chair-elect of the Emory University Faculty Council. I'll take office at the end of next month. I am not here to represent the views of the Emory administration, but I can testify to concerns of many of Emory's faculty, students, and staff. For the past 6 months, I have been part of a University Senate subcommittee working on revising and clarifying Emory's open expression policy. Our goals in that process are similar to the goals of this bill, namely to protect content-neutral expressive activity and lay out reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions. And Mr. Chairman, just what you were saying there, I think applies perfectly right. The First Amendment is not unlimited. And so in our process at Emory, working on this subcommittee, we've tried to clarify a policy that is, and this shares what the bill's doing, that it's attempts to recognize and safeguard free speech, aims to prevent conduct that would significantly hinder any other group's expressive activity, or it also attempts to hinder any activity that would engage in violence or fighting. So share that entirely. It's also content and viewpoint neutral. That's important. So if somebody is demonstrating against this view or that, the opposite view, it doesn't matter. So those are the aims. I think they're laudable aims. I'm worried that this bill's means for achieving them are incoherent. So in my work on the University Senate, I share these goals, but it is difficult there's no law against yelling at somebody to try to shut them up. The heckler's protest, there's not a law. It's rude, it's impolite, it's inappropriate, but there's no law against it. Now, what I'm hearing today from the authors of the bill is much narrower than what I was hearing on Friday morning, which was focused mostly on preventing impeding on other people's speech. Today it seemed to be narrowed to violent activity, harassing activity, and I'm glad to hear that, because those are certainly illegal. So in our own policy, clearly that's a violation to do that. And there are laws against it, so it's not a matter of interpretation if somebody's charged with that. But it's harder to go into more other things. That's where I get worried. So of the people arrested at Emory, all but 28 people arrested, all but 2 were charged with disorderly conduct or criminal trespassing. So one question I have is, would those fall under, how would you interpret disorderly conduct? Somebody gets a ticket. Then let's say eventually they get a trial and they're found guilty of disorderly conduct. How would that rise to having to lose your funding? I really don't. I'm really curious about the answer to that. I'm worried that it would, that somebody would make an interpret. But if it, where's the line there? As for conduct codes, they are designed to regulate student behavior on campus, not to invite state sanctions. For example, Emory University recently revised its student conduct code with an additional proviso, and I think this is open to interpretation, supposedly that against violating others' privacy by simply recording something happening on campus. So that could be warranted if it's breaking into somebody's dorm room, and but does that include taping something happening on a public space on campus? So let's say somebody's found that they have violated the conduct code because they taped something happening on campus, say at an expressive event. Could that then be interpreted as trying to impede other people's expressive activity? See, this is where I get really, really worried about this bill. That's exactly where I get worried. I'm also worried, and I'm about to be done, I'm not worried about the bill's overreach in penalizing students for breaking any law with a vague suggestion that the act impeded others' expressive activity, especially when something can be rendered as trespassing in the sending of an email message. The morning of April 25th, the president of the university said, everyone stay off campus by email, and then suddenly it was a crime to be on campus, and then people were charged with criminal trespass. They hadn't checked their email. They didn't know they were suddenly breaking a law. Would criminal trespass then be a sanction that could lead to this? And this is not a hypothetical question because there are people still awaiting trials. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Reverend Kiana Jones-Moore. Yes, ma'am. You want to come to the table as well?
I will.
Yeah, yes. No, wherever you may. I will just tell you and all the speakers wherever you are most comfortable.
I prefer to stand. I'm not
Over your message to your folks, you might be standing and not sitting. Yes, Reverend.
Well, good morning, and thank you for convening this time to get further explanation on this bill. This bill looks to be quite an overreach, and it is quite expansive. The things that it aims to target, as was just expressed by the previous speaker, those things don't really seem to be happening in this bill. And as a person who not only shepherds a congregation that is full of active young people who believe in standing up for the things that they believe in and that they're passionate about, I've seen and I've been with them at times when they have exercised that free speech. I've been on the campus of Emory University quite a few times. I've been on the campus of Georgia State University quite a few times when protests are happening. And the only people that I saw engaging in violence were the police. There were not protesters who were speaking up for anything in particular, whether they were for or against a certain thing, who were engaging in violence with each other. The other times that I have seen violence exacted were from those people who Representative Panich wanted to talk about are the 90% of Jewish people violence came from the side of people who were labeling themselves as Zionists. And I take particular offense to Representative Panich's expression that 90% of Jewish people are Zionists. There was a time when 90% of this country thought slavery was okay. And is that where we're going with this? But I do see that the language in this bill looks to criminalize people and honestly punish them twice, because a lot of the language talks about someone already being convicted or found guilty of something. So this is excessive and extreme punishment, but also the language seems to equate violence to simple dissent. And that is not right. That does chill the right to free speech. It is the chilling of public space and freedom of expression and association. And when I see that there's been great lengths taken to narrow down language to a point where you can say, it looks like we only want to protect a certain type of student and others would be left unprotected and actually targeted by this bill. I do believe that this bears quite a bit more thought, quite a bit more revision, and that when you think about students in their activities at school, this is the time where many people realize what their thirst for justice is and what they're willing to do. So many people in this room claim to be Christians and they follow a person who is called Jesus. Well, Jesus did what was not popular at the time. And many of the things that Jesus did were punishable by the laws of that time. But we know that what Jesus did was stand up for the right thing. These students are simply doing the same thing that Jesus would do. And I believe that if you go back and work on this some more, you can achieve what you say you want to achieve, but it will require you to be honest and to be open-minded and to view everyone as equal.
Thank you, Reverend. Lauren Wilson. Let's move on if we can through these.
My name is Lauren Wilson. I'm a third-year political science student at Clark Atlanta University, and I have come here to express my opposition to HB 602. In a hearing I was in only a few moments ago, there was a claim spewed that DEI restricts free speech and hinders certain parties from expressing their view of this country. Now we, the students of Georgia, are to be penalized because we are politically prosecuted on our campuses and in this state. Student protesters do not wish to start out with disruptive protests. We hold meetings with our administrators, write letters, express our dissent, and I think we all can agree that those who harms others in any capacity should be held accountable. However, the vague language in HB 602 will foster unintended consequences for students and student organizers who, in context of the past year, do not wish to promote anti-Semitism or any sort of hate speech to our Jewish brothers and sisters, but only wish to see Palestinian children grow without bombs flying over their heads that our tax dollars and sometimes tuition dollars pay for. The instances of serious harm being committed by student protesters is largely sensationalized. I don't say this to excuse any of these actions that do happen, but to acknowledge that the majority of students arrested for these protests were building encampments on their campuses, pouring red paint on the slave owners that remain infantilized on our campuses, and simply saying that Palestinians have a right to live. I urge you all not to declare war on student organizers and advocates who are only following the long tradition of students being the disruptive force that begets progress in our nation and in this state. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan Gordon. Come on up. I'm not rushing you, but I'm also going to go. Mr. Babb, you will be next. Elijah Brewer, you will follow Mr. Babb. So I'll just give you our next up and on deck.
Good morning, y'all. Thank you for being here at this truly ungodly hour to listen to us speak. I've emailed all of this to you, so you can mull it over and recommend it to your colleagues who decided to sleep, which I wish we could have done. I'm going to talk y'all through the bill and the free speech implications in the bill and the ways in which it bleeds over into capturing peaceful nonviolent protest. I'm just going to dive right in. So the examples of materially and substantially disruptive conduct are overly broad, which is going to capture nonviolent protest. If we look at Clause 1, that unlawful behavior could include trespassing, which is a really classic charge we see for peaceful protesters, and all schools have to do to get a student arrested for trespassing is simply declare that they no longer have permission to be on campus, which they often do to clear out protesters. Just say, you don't have permission to be here anymore, so they can call the police and clear them out. If we look at Clause 3, physically blocking, et cetera, to prevent people from participating in an expressive activity, this would capture a peaceful sit-in in the lobby of a building to prevent people from attending an objectionable event. And first of all, I understand that this and a lot of the other stuff I'm about to describe is stuff that a lot of y'all would find objectionable, rude, like really repulsive behavior, but honestly, y'all, like protecting behavior that people find distasteful is frankly the entire point of the Bill of Rights. Chanting or yelling over a speaker is still speech in the very literal sense and would be constitutionally protected regardless of whether some might consider it bad behavior. It's same with a sign or a banner to block another sign. If we look at Clause 4, occupying or materially disrupting ingress-egress use of facilities, this would also capture peaceful sit-ins. Classic example of nonviolent protest. Same with sort of desegregating buses, which was a protest done to desegregate UGA when they first started admitting Black students. Materially disrupting use of campus facilities also allows broad space for viewpoint discrimination and enforcement. I'm going to give y'all 2 examples of different scenarios. So let's imagine the day before a big sports game, frat members run inside a cafeteria at dinner time. They're painted in school colors, blowing horns, chanting, "Go Dogs" or "Go Jackets," trying to cover my bases here, disrupting dinner. And then imagine a different scenario where same dinner time, protesters come in chanting and hanging a banner for their cause of choice. It's roughly the same level of disruption to mealtime, right? It's annoying, no one can hear, but we can still eat, right? But it's unlikely the fraternity members are going to be punished in the same way because we kind of accept frat bros as a part of campus life. But the protesters probably would be punished, and that would be considered unconstitutional content-based discrimination. Moving on to Clause 5, materially violating time, place, and manner restrictions. Now, this point requires further research, but I just want to point out that this isn't necessarily a good metric of whether a protest is getting out of hand, because the First Amendment doesn't actually apply to private campuses because it only protects us from the government, right? Private campuses aren't the government. And so private schools are allowed to have time, place, and manner restrictions that are more restrictive than public schools. So you could see scenarios where conduct that would be perfectly okay on a public campus would be punishable on a private campus. Now, to figure out whether that is currently or would happen would require a pretty systemic analysis of student codes of conduct across like all of our current campuses. So like, I have not done that. I'm just saying like that would require a lot more analysis, and we would need to think about that before we just assume that captures what we intend here. And again, that would also capture peaceful protests such as sit-ins, which are by nature in an inconvenient location that would almost certainly violate manner restrictions. Finally, I want to talk about the First Amendment disclaimer in Section B because it's an insufficient protection. Because first of all, as I said, the First Amendment doesn't apply to private colleges and universities. So excuse me, to look at my notes. If we're simply doing that, then that doesn't actually protect private schools. But also, because of everything I've just described, we're writing a bill that tells campuses to both violate and not violate the First Amendment. So it is at best confusing and poorly written legislation that's going to create a lot of problems in implementation. And it leaves schools a lot of work to do in parsing out what behavior is and is not protected, because they now have to be like the experts in the First Amendment and figuring this out on the go with very, very high stakes for the students. Because if they get this wrong, or if they get it right, it's derailing students' education. So it would be much better to write more clear legislation on the front end than just write this and throw in a First Amendment disclaimer, because that doesn't necessarily solve your problems. Well, it doesn't solve your problems. So all that to say, this bill is a free speech nightmare, and I ask y'all to please oppose this bill.
Thank you. Mr. Babb. Elijah Brewer is on deck, and Maddie Morgan follows that. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Thank you. My name is Steve Babb, and I'm here today as a concerned citizen from Lawrenceville. My father was a member of the greatest generation who fought fascists, white supremacists, and nativists in World War II. My dad came home, he went to college on the GI Bill, and he became an English professor. He was the only professor in his English department with a crew cut and tattoos on his forearms. He had tattoos before they were cool. He had a skull and crossbones on one forearm and an anchor with the initials USN on the other. My dad had a reputation among his students as the toughest teacher you'll ever love. My father also had an impressive repertoire of profanity and zero tolerance for BS, can't, hypocrisy, Orwellian doublespeak, and sunshine patriots. My father risked his career to speak out against Joseph McCarthy's assault on academic freedom and American democracy. He held his politicians to the same standards he held his students to, and they frequently did not pass muster. My father would have choice words for modern-day McCarthyites who are trying to strip principled students who have the guts to speak out against Israel's Gaza genocide of their First Amendment freedoms. Suppressing speech they can't tolerate and that they can't refute is the last refuge of scoundrels, despots, and cowards. You know, when neither the facts nor the law are on your side, all that's left is pounding the table, yelling at the top of your lungs, and changing the subject by smearing the truth tellers. My father would be appalled at the cynicism, hypocrisy, and dishonesty of HB 602's sponsors, and at the GOP's wider war on education, honest history, and freedom of thought, speech, dissent, and protest. Not many freedoms left after that list. If my father were here today, the bill sponsors would leave today's hearings with a few new four-letter words in their vocabulary that just might motivate them to rediscover their sense of shame. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Babb, and we thank you for your father's service. Elijah Brewer. Maddie Morgan will be next, and after that, Francesca Rule.
Appreciate it. Good morning, y'all. My name's Elijah Bronner. I am a product of Georgia Public Schools, a graduate of the University System of Georgia, and a seminary student at the Candler School of Theology. I'm here in opposition to HB 602. When I was in my undergraduate, I worked very extensively with a variety of student groups, ones I agreed with and ones I disagreed with, in order to make sure that they were able to most fully organize and express their particular political opinions. This means that I assisted in the rechartering of both the college Democrats and the college Republicans. This means that I assisted in the constitution of groups which were well outside the Overton window, and then assisted them in their negotiations with admin. I had the privilege to meet with many University System of Georgia administrators when I went to the University of West Georgia, and in so doing, I always advocated for the same thing, which is content-neutral free speech protections with democratic accountability. Now, the chief concern I have with HB 602 is that it is not democratically accountable. Because students can be prosecuted via conduct charges at their particular university, those students would then be able to have their financial aid restricted on the decision effectively of those conduct bodies. Those conduct bodies are neither elected nor recallable nor accountable, which means that you give unfettered leeway to unelected bureaucrats to restrict student free speech based on their personal whim. Now, I have seen this actually happen, by the way. So, for example, we had at one particular university that I was working with, because I worked with students at a bunch of public universities. At one particular university I was working with, the particular administrator that was in charge of making sure that student organizations were following what they were supposed to be following had a particular bent. She was biased towards certain causes. And one of the things that we found very quickly was that some of the students I worked with found it incredibly easy to receive permits, incredibly easy to find tabling space and all these other things. Students of a different political orientation did not find it that easy. The bill aims to reduce disruptive conduct. Now, certain forms of protest, certain forms of dissent, certain forms of speech are disruptive. I was brought up in the semi-rural South. We're running out of rural in many parts of the state, but I was brought up in Troup County outside LaGrange, and I was brought up with stories of disruptive people. I was brought up with stories of the patriots who founded this nation at a harbor in Boston. I was brought up with stories of the more modern patriots who refounded this nation in the stories I was told on buses in Montgomery and speeches in D.C. and things like that. These were disruptive people. Our republic was built by disruptive people. If we stop producing disruptive people, you can bet we'll stop producing a republic soon after. The stances that I have helped students take in the past as a student organizer and activist have been unpopular among administrators, have been unpopular among other students. I have assisted students in receiving the ability to give speech that I personally find abhorrent. However, students at a university are supposed to be challenged. You're supposed to be put through the ringer. Your ideas are supposed to be hammered out. That's what my dad taught me. There's a lot of Navy veteran dads going around, but if any of you have a veteran dad, you know how they are about just taking your word for it. Your ideas are supposed to be hammered. They're supposed to be tried. At a university, that's the best place for that to happen. Some of that has to be disruptive. Your ideas are never going to come to be fully questioned if they're never put an alternative in front of you that interrupts your day, interrupts your way of going about it, interrupts what you previously thought was possible. And maybe you come out of it and you think, those guys are a bunch of jerks, like, I don't agree with that. That's fine. But if school administrators have the ability to restrict based on content, which they do if they are allowed to dish out these consequences, however, then we know that existing biases against certain political viewpoints in education settings will become amplified because these administrators know that if they apply these positions, whether they're applying them to conservatives or liberals or, like I said, sometimes things outside that window, then they will know they can just get rid of these people. And then the university can become safe. And the university can become a hug box where we only hear ideas that we've already heard before. And that's not what we want to see. So I oppose HB 602. I oppose it because it's democratically unaccountable. I oppose it because it undermines the values of a republic. And I oppose it because it's a restriction on free speech, which would impede the ability of students to learn from a diversity of viewpoints. Thank you all so much, and God bless.
Thank you. Maddie Morgan.
Good morning.
My name is Maddie Morgan, and I'm a first-year biology and political science double major attending Spelman College, one of many institutions that will be extremely negatively impacted by the passage of HB 602. As a Spelmanite, we pride ourselves on community service and social justice, and a major form of participation for us and thousands of college students like us is the use of protest. We protested our school's housing crisis, we protested in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we will protest again. Protesters at these events are often wrongfully arrested and or convicted for exercising their First Amendment right to protest. And the passage of HB 602 will make certain that this is an even larger issue. By removing state financial aid from students punished for protest-related activities, HB 602 gives aid from students punished, gives universities and colleges a basis for discrimination. This goes against everything we are meant to stand for as a nation and suppresses the American right to protest any law or other action deemed unfit by the people. In a country that claims to rely on the people, how can we punish those who refuse to let their voices be overlooked? HB 602 also makes higher education more inaccessible to lower income students by removing what may very well be a student's only means of pursuing higher education. Low income students should never be in fear of speaking up against a system that has notoriously been against them. As a low-income student myself, I expect to be able to make my voice heard in my community, in my local government, and in my country without worrying about whether or not I'll be able to pay next semester's dues. Considering that they're already disproportionately low income, Black and brown students will be extremely negatively impacted by the passage of HB 602 at a ridiculously high rate. The blockage of state financial aid will ensure that these individuals, including my sisters at my campus, will be unable to access higher education. I cannot express enough how harmful this bill will be to protesters who look like me. While it has been proposed that HB 602 will only impact those who are physically violent, HB 602 will undoubtedly be used to wrongfully persecute protesters who have done nothing to deserve the loss of their education. The idea that the push for desegregation should have and could have been less noisy for other students is exactly why HB 602 shouldn't be passed. Without the meaningful and monumental change that was done by those participating in the civil rights movement, there's a very real chance that I would be unable to stand before you and speak as freely as I am today. Students have every right to protest and to bring about change in the communities they serve, and HB 602 will directly dissuade young people from speaking against injustice. I ask you all to think about how this will harm young college students. Think about how this will stifle growth for our community, and think about how you'd feel if you or your child were to have their First Amendment right suppressed. During my time here, I have given you a few of many reasons why HB 602 should not be passed, and I therefore urge the committee to vote against this bill, or vote against HB 602, in order to protect our rights as members of this community and as citizens of this nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Francesca Rue. How did I do? Okay, thank you.
Good morning to the committee, and thank you for being here. My name is Francesca Rue. I'm a third-year economics major at Georgia Tech, and I'm here to speak against House Bill 602 in the strongest possible terms. I will keep it very simple, and I will keep it short. Students deserve second chances. We are the next generation, and we are the future of Georgia. Students who mess up in any variety of ways, which this bill covers, still deserve to continue their education. Going to school is a route to a better life that we should not deny anyone. Penalizing someone with a history of legal issues or ongoing legal issues, trying to go to school and improve their circumstances, is a barrier to education that we as Georgia Tech students wholeheartedly reject. We think that this bill would discriminate against students statewide, and I appreciate all of the other speakers' testimony. Thank you very much, and I hope that you all vote against this bill.
Yeah, Ms. Rue, can I just clear up something, because you said you and all Georgia Tech students are against this. Do you speak for any organization, or are you just using that as a plural we?
I am a concerned Georgia Tech student. I bring a bunch of other concerned Georgia Tech students. I am not speaking on behalf of the organization.
That's fine. I just wanted to be clear.
Yes.
You're welcome to
Thank you.
represent that. I just wanted to clear that you weren't the student body president, or you were speaking on behalf of an organization.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not.
Thank you very much. Cindy Battles. Yes, ma'am.
Good, really early morning. It is ate something. I need about another pot of coffee. This is my second committee hearing. Forgive me if I am incoherent. My name is Cindy Battles. I am the Policy and Engagement Director with the Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. Molly was kind enough on Friday to put this letter in your folder. It is a letter from the Helen Butler detailing her experience at UGA as one of the first 50 students to integrate the college. In there, she talks a lot about marching to have the Black Student Union recognized when they weren't allowed to be in the student union. There's details about surrounding the counter in the Bulldog room to make sure that the segregated bathroom signs are taken down. I think that maybe this body believes that we have solved those problems, so we don't need this form of protest. But I'm going to remind y'all, it wasn't that long ago that we were kneeling in the street demanding the arrest of the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. While we want to believe that we are past these issues, we are not. And this bill, I hear a lot in this body about the intent of the bill when we're arguing the impact of the bill. And I'd like to suggest that as legislators, it is your duty to consider the impact, even possibly more than what your intent is, because the way you word something is going to have far-reaching consequences for students. You say that the intent of this bill isn't to stifle free speech, but in here you talk a lot about having permission and brief and fleeting and that kind of thing. And the reality is, both in the experience of my executive director and today, protest is disruptive. As someone who has been arrested twice, during the Biden administration, by the way, for commoting, which is basically I stopped on the sidewalk in a moment of using our free speech to advocate for voting rights. There's very rarely anything accomplished by a brief or non-disruptive form of protest. I have to get your attention. I have to make sure you understand something, that something needs to change. And that is not done in a fleeting manner. So while you were saying that the intent of this bill is not to do this thing, by the phrases that you use, it is going to stifle free speech. When I was arrested, I knew that there would be consequences. I went to D.C. knowing that I was going to be arrested. I went to D.C. knowing that I was going to have to pay $50, right? Catch and release. Just for the record, in this state, it's 5 years and $1,000. So students who are engaging in forms of protest are agreeing to face certain consequences, to let their voices be heard. But what you are also doing is taking away their opportunity for the life that they want to live, for the life that their parents want them to live. And the idea that we're going to do that to someone because we don't like the way that they're making their voices heard, when you have in multiple ways today made sure that someone who gets drunk and starts a fight at a football game would not face those same consequences. Like, what are we saying about character if this is we're going to make sure that this isn't allowed, but if you are doing the same kind of behaviors during a protest, well, that's unacceptable and you're going to lose your scholarship. There's a line there, and that I think Megan did a much better job of describing than I will. I don't understand. I don't understand what we are trying to say when we are trying to delineate between those two type of things.
Would the lady give me an opportunity? You've asked the question.
Absolutely,
I would
yes.
try, and I don't want to take away your time, so
No,
I
you're
don't
fine.
want to quell your ability. But you've helped me delineate what I believe the bill intends to do. So I'm going to try to express that, and you tell me where I'm wrong. I don't think anything in this bill keeps folks from disrupting, from doing something that will get them on the news. But when that behavior threatens another individual on the campus, it's no longer just disruptive, it's dangerous. Would you not agree with that?
I would agree with that, but what I would also agree with is that the language of the bill is too broad. So what you're describing is not okay, but what the bill is saying is far broader than what you were saying.
Please help me understand what words you're talking about.
Anytime, the way that it describes protest, it has to be non-disruptive, it has to be brief, it has to be fleeting, they have to have permission to be there.
Can you draw us to the line?
I can if I have the right. I'm a little concerned I don't have the right LC number.
There's only one.
Okay, perfect. Then I do. I misunderstood someone's earlier
Can we
hand
hand
statement.
her a real copy of the bill so she does?
I mean, I
She's been
have
up
it on.
since 7 o'clock this morning. I don't
Oh,
want
I've
her
been
to
up
have to
since
strain
5
her eyes.
o'clock this
5
morning. I
o'clock this
appreciate
morning.
you.
Yes, ma'am.
I had to get up at 5 to be here.
And again, I don't mean, I want to engage you further here, and I don't want to be combative on this or
No,
take away from another speaker's time, but you did mention those words, and I wanted to find them.
Yes, sir. It says on line 55, minor, brief, or fleeting, nonviolent disruption of events that are isolated and short duration.
Well, that's also part of the overarching point that says if it's covered and protected by the Georgia Constitution and the First Amendment, nothing applies.
Right, I understand that, but you're saying that this applies in this instance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, all right. So I know where you're at there. All right. So you've been kind to that. We'll have time to share some more. So please continue.
Thank you.
But you do agree that disruptive behavior when targeting another individual can be dangerous, or do you not? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I agree to a certain extent. I don't know that. Can I give an example? February 5th, I believe, is when the 50-51 protest happened outside the state capitol. Myself and 4 other individuals went outside to be legal observers because they had not arranged for legal observers. And we felt like it's important to have those, so we went out there. During our time as legal observers, because we were wearing these clothes and our badge, they did not recognize who we were. I had someone threaten me, like, I'm going to throw hands, blah, blah, blah. One was chanting, mind your own uterus, for a good 30 minutes, not knowing who I was or like the work that I had done on the anti-abortion bill. Something else was said to me during this time frame, correct? So the thing is they were exercising their First Amendment rights. It was disruptive to me, but I never actually felt threatened. I did not feel like my safety was in danger. So I think that there is a line there, right? If they had approached me in such a way that I thought my safety was in danger, then yes, I would agree with you. But as long as all they're doing is screaming at me, they can scream at me all they want to. I'm not in danger.
Okay, let me give a different scenario of that, because we're talking about college campuses, not
right. But
not the open space.
I mean, the same things happened at schools. So,
and again, I'm not trying to be argumentative. We have a lot of language to work here.
Yes, sir.
And I'm taking a little time. We have one more speaker, and I know Representative Whip Park has some questions of the author, and I'm really trying to understand this. I think there's a huge difference. It's my opinion. There's a huge difference in that than individuals seated in a college classroom, or for that matter trying to get to one, but certainly seated in one, when a group comes in and says death to this particular group in that classroom and screaming, and I've got to be in class is what I've got to do. And that's, to me, is disruptive to the class. I'm not going to pick which group is saying death to whom, but to me, that's where they can stand out in the hall and do it. I think you could argue that. But when that goes to the point where they're coming over and they're trying to intimidate an individual who is simply trying to go to school, that's what I believe, if you read materially and substantially disruptive behavior, and then it has to be one of the 5 things. But I really appreciate your thoughts on this, and I'd like to drill down into them further. So I won't interrupt you further. Please continue.
I think the one last thing that I would say, and I really appreciate the conversation that we're having here, is death to so-and-so is an entirely different thing than free so-and-so. Or take down segregation signs, or arrest this person, or voting rights for everyone, or any of the things that I'm describing. But I would also suggest that if that is exactly what you're going for, that's the narrowness of what you're hoping to do. First of all, I don't think this bill does that. And second of all, if I'm not mistaken, we passed a hate crimes legislation in this body. So what you're trying to do is already covered in Georgia law.
I mean, the hate crimes legislation is an additional sentence that may be given if you're already convicted of an existing crime. So if you're saying that's already in Georgia law, then you're saying all these things we're doing in this bill already are illegal in Georgia law, and I don't believe that's the case.
But if you say death to so-and-so, that's a terroristic threat.
I don't think saying, if I said death to you, that might be a terroristic threat. If I said it in a general sense, I don't believe it is. But again, let me please finish the.
I think at this point I am completely done, but I appreciate the conversation.
Well,
I hope that if this is something that y'all want to pass, because I know crossover day is Thursday, I feel like a number of issues have been raised with the way that the bill is worded. I hope that there's work that can be done on it. So that it is narrower, so that it does what you guys, not only the intent, that the intent meets the impact. And if I've heard a number of really good legislation in the last couple of weeks that isn't going to survive crossover, I hope that this is one of them where you can continue to work and maybe bring it back next session.
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate your thoughtful testimony and your insightfulness on the words, and hope you will work with not only our office but the author and maybe some people that aren't for the the bill, the authors for the bill. There's obviously people that have opposition to it, and then there's people that just want to work on it to try to find the best possible solution, which I think is what you're trying to do. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Blake Lowry Osborne. Where do you choose to be, sir? Do you want to be standing or sitting?
I've been sitting for a while, so I guess standing would be pretty good, sir. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here to voice my complete opposition to this bill. My name is Blake Lowry Osborne. I am a proud graduate of Clark Atlanta University, the director of programming of a nonprofit organization called the Joseph and Evelyn and Lowry Institute for Justice and Human Rights that works with college students on a variety of different campuses. And I am the grandson of Dr. Joseph Lowry, who would, had he been here, be standing in my shoes right now to talk about why he would be so opposed to this bill. Now, it was brought up, and I understand that this bill is being designed to look at how they can keep from disruption happening on campuses and how protests cannot be disruptive. But you can't have a non-disruptive protest. That is the point of a protest, as it has been mentioned by other speakers, to draw attention to something, to make you stop. Because if I don't disrupt you, you won't stop and even hear me and listen to what I'm saying. And I understand that there are those who feel that they must be protected because what's happening at some protests can be seen as harassment or violence, but it is not harassment to tell you you're wrong. It is not harassment to have dissent. And what this bill does in your broad application of it is it polices dissent. And I feel like if you think about that, you're policing dissent not in other legislators, policymakers, people who may be a little bit more seasoned to the process, but we're talking 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. Policing their dissent is wrong. Creating a culture where they can lose their scholarships. It was mentioned earlier in this committee meeting that scholarships are a privilege, and that is something that I actually agree. However, I would say they're also a privilege that is earned by the recipient. And those students you're trying to take the scholarships from because maybe they engaged in a protest earned that scholarship through their grades and their merits through all their hard work. And it is not fair for a body whether it is the Georgia legislature, whether it is their honor society or the honor council at their school, to say your merits and that 4.0 that you spent your entire life and dedication on, we're going to take it because of one action. That is not fair to those students, and you directly challenge the merits of their ability to achieve those scholarships. Those should be protected. Their rights to speak should be protected, not their rights to cause fights. I think there's been enough arguing or discussion in the chamber about whether somebody should engage in violence, although I did find it interesting that it was a discussion that, yes, if a protester punches somebody, they should lose their scholarship, but a couple drunk people punching somebody, hey, we'll just pat them on the head and move on. That, to me, denotes there's a challenge here, that this bill needs more work, because you should not punish, you should not criminalize, and you should not restrict young people simply for trying to raise a voice, even if it is a voice you do not like or agree with. They still have the right to say it. And under this law, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard this also, this is something that you go through the criminal system, there's a case put on you, and then you go against your board. This is overkill. You're punishing these students again and again. They already have If they already have gone through the trial, they've already been arrested, that's a punishment. That's a consequence for me engaging in this protest. As some have said, I knew the consequence when I walked in the room. That's fine. I accepted that. But what is not fair is to then compound it with an additional consequence in terms of taking their livelihood, taking their ability to go to school. So I urge you, I plead with you to look at the young people in this room, the ones who have spoken and the ones who would if they were here, and for my grandfather who would tell you this is wrong. You should not do this. Thank you.
Thank you. And just if I could, Mr. Osborne, just to rest, you brought up a good point, and I want to direct. I don't know if we still have Liz. There's Anna to help me with this. But Anna, can you look up and have back for us, or help us get with the university system and TCSG? I believe it is true that every public university, I can't speak to the privates, but every unit of the university system and TCSG has a code of conduct. Mm-hmm. And I can't speak on the specifics of it, but I believe if two students get in a fight at a Georgia football game, and it rises to the level that they're both arrested and they may be both charged with felony assault, I think they're going to get invited not to come back to school. They're probably going to be suspended and or expelled based on the code of conduct. So there's already some things that are taking place around that, and I'd like just to get those back relative to the gentleman's point of double.
May I just retort to that, though?
Yes, sir.
My only retort to that would be, but yes, but you're not then taking their scholarships.
Well,
They're getting expelled. Like these students, like the example that was brought up earlier about the students at Barnard, they got expelled. Under this system, they would get expelled, and we take their scholarship. It's the additional step.
And that's the fair thing, and we'll move along. But it's so you think the 2 years may be too much?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. That's an item for discussion and debate. Thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes our speakers. I want to come back and ask Representative Fleming if we want to come back. We have a few minutes, just a few, but I want to go back to Whip Park first because I stopped you in the midst of a question, and I think the whip's for the indulgence in order to allow us to get to our speakers. So first we're going to go back to Whip Park. You had a question for the author. I didn't turn you on yet, Whip Park. Sorry about that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm trying to better understand, if this moves forward, how it would be enforced. Again, because of how broad some of these definitions are, Chairman Martin, so for example, looking at lines 43, materially and substantially disruptive conduct also includes simply creating loud or sustained noises, in which my understanding has been, to combat, free speech, the best way to, disagree or express your thoughts is with more free speech as opposed to trying to silence dissent, which by saying that you can lose your scholarship or your financial ability to attend college by booing at, let's say, a neo-Nazi that came to speak on a college campus, I again think that this bill goes way too far, undermines free speech rights of students, and for those reasons I find very concerning and, against American values of free speech and protest. So share with me again, how would this be enforced, right, in a way in which there's not going to be selective treatment and how we are not chilling free speech?
Thank you, Whip Park, and I appreciate your thoughts. And once again, I think it gets down to the interpretation and how each of us interpret this. It would be enforced on each campus by their administration, their campus security, when they have events on campus. As we talked about Friday, I know you weren't here Friday. We talked about the difference between events that are permitted and non-permitted on the, quad spaces, on buildings, different places like that. This bill aims to protect your First Amendment rights and your right to free speech. All it is simply saying, once the line is crossed and things get disruptive, it is a tool that the university system at TCSG and private institutions have, another tool in their tool belt to ensure that these types of situations don't get unruly. We are not saying that you shouldn't do it. We're not saying you can't do it. We're just saying there's going to be additional penalties if you cross these lines.
So
I mean, to me, if you're going into a university or college and you understand, just like the student code of conduct, I don't know if students still have to sign a student code of conduct when they go in as freshmen, but I know when I was in school, I did, saying you understood what the student code of conduct. Here are the rules, here's the playing field, and you know this as you spend your time through your academic career on this campus.
Representative Fleming, again, I think you kind of said the word, right? When you cross the line, right? If there is uncertainty or ambiguity in this committee full of legislators as to what that line is based on what is written here in this bill, how are all of our college campuses supposed to also make that determination of where that red line is? And because it's vague, necessarily it is overbroad. And that is why we continue to raise the concern that it will scare students, right? It will scare them from utilizing their First Amendment right to free speech and protest.
Is there a question in there?
So is that not true?
Well, I appreciate your thoughts and your opinions, Mr. Whip. You have your right to interpret this, and it's we interpret it our way, and that's why we have outlined what they are.
Thank you. Representative Jackson, Edna Jackson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to apologize for not being here on Friday. I was ill, and I had to go back to Savannah.
Yes, ma'am.
But as I just heard the little portion here that I've heard, in the 60s, we protested at my university, college, Savannah State College, because of some of the things that the students felt were not being given to them. Those same students, had they gone through something like this, would not have served in this legislature. Bobby Hill would not have become judges, would not have been mayors of our city, Mayor Otis Johnson, and what have you. They were protests that were controlled by the students, the leaderships on the campus. Maybe I need to go back and read what is in this document, but it seems like what you're trying to do is to silence the students and not giving them what they need to do.
No, ma'am.
And
That's not it.
I'm going to try to be fair to everybody. We're short on time here. We're going to have time to debate the measure and work on the measure.
Thank you.
If we have questions, that's what I want to do, because we have to wind up. We're going to be back to work on that.
I've not read the document.
Thank you. Representative Bernal. Where you are. There you are. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it necessary for us to have a law? Is it not the responsibility of the university? Because I remember that when Chairman Josh Bonner had a bill, and
get to a question, please.
Well, if you're not going to let me ask the question.
Well, you asked him a question. Is it necessary for the law? I mean, is that your question?
Yeah, because I want to know, is it necessary for this to be a law? Because I remember in this body, in this committee, when Chairman Josh Bonner had that bill where I could bring a friend on campus, they could protest, and we passed that. So I'm not understanding now why we're into punishing students. So, and at that time, the university system had something, and we added to it. So I'm asking, is it necessary for us to add to the university to give them something else? They have to, a law. as opposed to letting them, as individual universities, handle their students in the way that they think is necessary.
Yes, ma'am, I do believe it. As I said before, this has given the university system, the TCSG, and private institutions another tool that they could have. Yes, ma'am.
Did they ask for it?
Representative.
Did they ask for it?
Barnes.
Did they specifically? No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Representative Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From my understanding, these children will be double punished. They will have to go through 2 trials, one with the university, one with, I guess they have to go through another trial as well. And they also have to keep their grades up to be able to qualify for state funds as well. So are we not putting too much on a student that wants to have free speech who also understands the code of conduct for school? And then also, if a student is walking through a protest and happens to have a fight pick with them from a non-student and they're defending themselves, will they still be criminalized from this bill?
Well, and that's where the process of going through the criminal process or the institutional investigation would work that out. I mean, I absolutely, I see what you're saying. There could be situations where you have a student who's trying to get to class or
right.
get to an event, and say a rock's thrown at them, and something like that. I agree, and that would need to be fleshed out through the investigative process. And the intent is not to penalize
Through a
in
double
issues like that.
investigation process, right?
That's right.
I'm sorry.
Keep their grades up to keep the financial assistance.
Representative Scoggins.
Representative Fleming, is it not true this bill does not stop peaceful protest or does not stop free speech? Is that
That's
true?
correct. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we hear all the time that this is it not true that we hear all the time that we have simple bills on the floor for a vote? And in my idea, this is a simple bill. If you want to protest, follow the rules or don't violate the law. If you do, you get your financials.
Let's keep.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna keep,
You're
I'm gonna keep
100% correct.
I said, is that not
short,
true?
But I understand, but we've got 3 more people in here, and we have a hard stop 5 minutes ago, which I guess means it wasn't a hard stop. Representative Clark, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have 3 very quick yes or no
You're
questions.
recognized for one.
Yes,
You're
they're
recognized
yes
for
or no
one,
questions. They're quick.
and then we're going to go to
All right,
your colleagues.
line, I guess I'll just have to choose then.
Yes, ma'am.
Line 25 says irrespective of pendency or availability of an appeal. So what this says is that if a student is convicted and they have the opportunity or they have appeal that is pending and there has not been a decision on that appeal, that they would still lose their scholarship. So what if they win their appeal? Are we going to retroactively give them their money back? And I want to follow up to that. What if you already have a criminal conviction before this law passed? Does this now retroactively apply to students? Are we inadvertently? I mean, because it's nowhere in here that says that it doesn't retroactively.
I understand, Representative, but that is not the intent. No, that is not an intent for it to be retroactive. If there's a criminal. Can you ask that?
The question was, or our first question that issues recognized was, if pending an appeal, then they're adjudicated to be not guilty, would there be reinstatement of the scholarship for the previous term?
Yes, I mean, that's through working out the rules and everything, we would figure that out.
Thank
Yes.
you. We're with here, Whip Park. And again, we're gonna be back to have a more thorough.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
are you open to taking any action? If so, I'd like to make a motion to table the bill.
We're not going to do that. We don't have time for that. Thank you very much. I mean, but as a matter, we're holding it in the committee, so it's the same thing. Do you feel gentleman waves here? So we're going to move on and thank the gentleman and
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the speakers. I do want to encourage the folks that have come and notice language to get information to the chair and to the author of the bill, to the people, some of the members that oppose the bill, as we work toward the matters. Work toward matters to perfect the bill. If there's no further information before the committee, we'll stand adjourned without objection. We are adjourned.